Hey, everybody, welcome back. If you were on the last session, I want to welcome you back to this session. If you're just coming in, we want to welcome you. My name is Sharon Brubaker. I'm a grief specialist and the owner of the Premier Grief School. I help women who are grieving from a loss due to death and teach an educational program on grief where you can find peace on your healing journey. Thank you so much. My partner in crime is Joy Renique. Hey, Joy, just welcoming everybody. Joy is a life story coach. We put together this platform to really speak to as many grievers as we can. We have some amazing guests here today, and our title is Finding Grief Support, which I think is when you've come across a loss and you've had or a tragedy in your family, it's the first thing. I don't think that the griever is always thinking about. I think it's the person right next to the griever. Where can I find him help? Let me call this person. Let me call that person. Hey, dial this number. So it's not always you, the griever, because your brain is not ready there, but sometimes it's the person next to you. So we have, I'm trying to see the names here. Ken Guidroz, who is also one of the featured speakers. This is great. Ken and I are personal friends, and it looks like he's got babysitting duty. So this is going to be a lot of fun. We want to interview the
Just for a
baby.
couple minutes.
We want to interview that baby. And
Oh my
Diana
gosh.
Hernandez Swain, who was a speaker last year, and we're so honored to have her back. She and I just did a great interview together. And the topic of our subject last year was she is more than just her death. And I love that subject because it's not just about the tragedy that has happened to us and planning the funeral and doing all those things. We have to talk about Ken, you are totally fine. Don't worry. You are totally
Okay.
fine.
All right.
You have to talk about we have to talk about who they were and what they meant to us. So, Ken, why don't we give you a chance? Why don't you come on and introduce yourself to our guests, and then Diana will have you do introduce yourself.
Excellent. Well, guys, great to be with you. And I did talk about restoring or rebuilding your marriage and your family after loss was my subject, and it's a beautiful subject. Come on, that's a
Yeah,
good one, right? You don't want to lose your life
yeah,
because of loss. You don't want loss. You don't want loss to become loss compounded, right? And I actually, it's funny. My wife just left to get my other grandkids, but I do have grandkid duty, and I want to integrate this munchkin into
yeah.
this discussion. There is an
Awesome.
angle.
We
Yep,
want to
there's
see
your
the
angle.
munchkin.
We want to see the munchkin and
Oh,
the
look, and
dog.
the dog.
So what's kind of cool is this is what's kind of cool is this is yeah. Thanks for smacking my computer. This is kind of related to my loss. I
Yeah.
wrote a book called Letters to My Son in Prison. This is now his son. So
Wow.
my son, who almost, I'm not going to say almost died, but went through what he went through. Guess what? He got out of prison. We reunited. He got his life together. He married a wonderful gal. And then they produced this munchkin right here. I mean, it's not full circle. I don't want to be too glib about it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, my book does have, and my life and my son's life has two almost inexorable or inconsolable truths living next to each other. One is that a man did die, and a woman is a widow today. And you talk about grief. She's got
Yeah.
her grief, right?
Yeah.
And the other is that my son lived, and then this,
Yeah.
and this goes on, and
Yeah.
there's no fairness in it. There's
Yeah.
no ability for us to reconcile this. It's irreconcilable. But that's just true of life, right?
Yeah.
And that is true of some of the losses that I've had in my life.
Yeah.
Whether they be spiritual losses and some of the challenges in rebuilding. And for me, it was not so much rebuilding my marriage, but making sure I didn't lose it during some of our challenging times. And I shared about what worked for us, and how we how we tried to not antagonize each other, the space we gave each other, etc. Just the typical stuff. And so, yeah, it's kind of ironic that this guy, he's looking up at me right now. You know what I mean? It's kind of ironic that during this session, he just had, I'm working my day job. My wife just happened to walk up and say, hey, so-and-so, I need this. Can you watch him for 10 minutes? And it happened to be these 10 minutes. Way to go, man. Come on.
Nothing happens by accident, right?
Yeah.
And I want to give a disclaimer. So Ken's video will be available tomorrow for all of the free ticket holders. If you have legacy level, you have access to his presentation right now. You're able to watch it right after the call. And Ken is actually going to join us in one of our taboo talks on tomorrow. So if you want to engage with him after you watch his presentation, you can join us. The legacy level pass holders can join us in the taboo talk. But absolutely, I want to make sure everybody know we're here to engage with you guys. If you didn't get a chance to watch our first session, the replay will be available. But today we want to work with you guys and answer your questions about grief support, what it looks like to find it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it back over to Diana. Tell us who you are, how you got into this space, but give us a brief summary of your presentation.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me again. It's an honor to be back the second year. I did not sign up to be part of the grief club, and I don't think anybody ever signed up. But I found myself in the grief club about 10 years ago when my sister, I am the youngest of 4, my second oldest was diagnosed with stage 4 gastritic cancer, and I was one of the caregivers for her. And she did lose her battle to cancer 11 months after her diagnosis, which is actually long for stage 4 and that type of cancer. And I had the understanding and knowledge and knowing in my brain that she would pass, and also nothing prepared me for the level of grief. There was a lot of guilt. There were a lot of questions. We talked last week about how there was that detective work of, had we gone earlier, what could have happened and prevented, and all of that are kind of natural responses to grief. And then I thought I was good with grief, or I wouldn't say I thought I was good. I just was pretending it wasn't there because I didn't know how to cope, which is why this topic is important. But 15 months after my sister passed away, my sister right before me, she took her life. And so she died by suicide. And that was a complete shock as well, because I didn't know, right? Everything's 2020. There were clues and signs, but I didn't have the knowledge, the insights, the language on how to speak to her. And I was also candidly dealing with my own grief. And I think everybody in my family was. And after a few years, and I would say more of really facing grief and it started to produce anxiety in my life. I was having anxiety attacks. I was barely coping. I don't know how I went through that first year after my sister took her life, but afterwards I knew I had to do something different. And that's when I really jumped into the journey of, okay, what is this thing called grief? What are these feelings and emotions? Because I knew I didn't want to end up like my other sister that took her life. I knew that in my family, we did not do well with emotions. We didn't talk about emotions. Yeah. I knew that there was something there that was keeping me stuck. And that's why finding grief support was so important. And I did find support through my life coach, my mentor. She's a 5-time cancer survivor who I'm just like, I barely dealt with one. I can't imagine 5 times, but she's a 5-time cancer survivor and such a joy of life. And when I met her, I just said, I just want whatever Kool-Aid you're drinking, because whatever you're drinking, you're optimistic, you're full of hope. And I just want to feel slightly what you're feeling. And truly 3 years of therapy, spinning, to within 6 months, I was so much better in the sense that I could talk about it. I could honor the feelings that were coming up. No judgment, but if I was having a bad day, I could honor and cope and work with it. And I think that's so important as anybody going through loss and grief to give themselves that space, to know how to process in a healthy way and to build a positive relationship with their own unique grief journey.
All right. And so let's go ahead and get started about grief support. I want to talk about the non-traditional ways. I love, Ken, how you use letters to your son in order to get support. You supported each other by you talked about a book that you sent him that he read and he reflected on. So talk about what that type of that traditional grief support looks like from a family perspective.
Yeah, I'm not as educated in the vernacular of grief as you are, right? I only know what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was doing. But I have a son from whom I'm estranged, sitting in a prison, right? So how do you connect? I gotta connect some way. So yeah, I mean, we use very creative ways. We read a book together. It was on evolution and God and reconciling the two, written by Francis Collins, who headed the NIH for, I don't know, 15 years under Clinton and everybody. Anyway, that was a bonding experience, because then we would just talk a ton about it. So yeah, he's reading, I'm reading, I'm writing, he's writing. I channeled David, this borderline salacious version of the David Bathsheba story. It's PG. Okay, it's PG-13. It's not R. It's not rated R. Come on, Sharon. It's not rated R. I wrote a rated R version. That was really fun.
I just love that you said that. Okay, so let me ask you this. Before you sent him the book, and since we're talking about support, go back to that day, Ken. Where did you think you were going to get the support from? And did you even want it?
You mean support for me?
Support for you, for your family. I mean, you guys had just had this tragedy. Where was the support going to come from? Were you reaching out for it? Were you looking for it? Can you remember?
I was running away from it. Right. I wanted to crawl under my desk. I didn't want to talk to anybody. So for me, it was fetal position as opposed to, clamoring.
Yeah.
I mean, I was embarrassed, right? I had been a pastor. My family had imploded. I'm like, I want to be on the trail at about 10,000 feet in the Sierra, but that's about all I want to be. Yeah. And Mumford, my dog, I could hang with him. I could talk with him. He I could handle.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, right or wrong, that's what I did, was pulled inward.
Yeah.
Now, I did reach out to Lucas, who was in prison. There was this distance, right? Because you have letters, and so he's a mess. I'm a mess. So there was this odd solidarity, almost a weird solidarity between us that created a unique vehicle.
Yeah.
And then he went from county jail to a place called reception. And in reception, there was no phone calls and there was no personal visits. So it was all letters. Once it became all letters, I just started to write some weird stuff to him, like just telling him all about my life, like really weird, way more than I should tell, way more than anybody would be interested in. And yet it kind of like was therapeutic, at least for me and him in some ways, because then he started writing me weird stuff about long letters, meaningless, stupid letters. But it was this weird little connection we developed, and that was therapeutic in a way.
That was almost a support. You guys were supporting each other.
Yeah.
Because you one of the things Erica said, she loved being with Lewis because she felt no one else in the room understood exactly how much pain she was in except for him, because they had both lost the boys, right? So no one knew exactly what you and Lucas were going through except the two of you. So it was a form of support.
I never thought about it that way, but you're right.
Yeah. Wow. It's cool.
We have a comment that says, we didn't do emotions in my family either. I remember growing up and hearing my mom say, cry with your mouth shut. I knew I needed to figure out what the feelings were, but still struggle with naming them. And it's like, how do you get support from the people around you when that is their response? Their natural, like that's a rule. Cry with their mouth shut, right? There's so many rules in our family, in society, and everywhere that is preventing us from even taking that first step towards support. I know that a lot of us on this call have taboo situations that brought us to grief. So Diana, share, some of the roadblocks of support before we get into, solutions and things that are out there.
I so appreciate that comment, because it instantly reminded me of my very first encounter with grief. And there's this company and this program called Grief Recovery Method, and there's a wonderful book, and I became a specialist through the Grief Recovery Method. And we talk about through that, what is the first grief experience that you had? And in my brain, I thought it was, when my sister passed away. But when I really dug deep, I remember when I was 5 years old that my uncle, who I didn't really know, but he was my dad's brother. I think my dad was 28 at the time, and my uncle was 26, something in that range, but he was definitely before 30, which is young, right? Like back then I was little, I was like, oh, they're so old, but they were young. And I remember it was my dad's brother, and it was my mom that received the news on the phone, and she's crying and crying. And it was the first time I saw like my mom, right? You're a little child, and your parents, to me, they're like heroes. And I just remember seeing my mom crying, and I start crying. And then my dad just snaps at my mom and he says, stop crying. It's not going to bring him back. And my mom stopped crying. And I realized that I had internalized that exchange as if you don't cry when bad things happen. I mean, we were not allowed to cry for my uncle, much less any other little thing, growing up. And that was very profound, because it gave me that understanding that when my sister passed away, Karen, her name was Karen, when Karen passed away by cancer, in my mind, I had internalized, I don't cry because I already knew she was going to pass. And therefore, why would I cry? I already knew she was passing. What are you talking about? And knowing that, wow, I had such a misconstrued, I'm not upset at my parents. My parents probably thought that I know that they believe that at their core, and they have to go through their own journey. But I recall how, wow, that really impacted how I was responding to my own grief. And I had to really give myself permission of, oh, well, why do I need to buy into that idea that I wouldn't cry if inside I'm feeling this urge to cry and release, and just that kernel of where did my grief come, or where did my response to how grief come through? Where did that come from? And having that question and then that insight into, wow, I did not realize I had internalized something so profound at 5 years old. No wonder I was responding a certain way. So going back to the question is, I don't think it's about, oh, well, if my parents or my family hadn't told me certain things, I would be in a different situation. It's more of, how am I going to choose to respond? Because at the end of the day, it is your own journey. It is your own experience. What am I going to do for myself? And giving yourself that grace and that permission that maybe you might have seen something or heard something from upbringings and family, very well intended. And I know it was well intended from my dad. I had no conflict about that. But really giving yourself permission, is this something of how I want to respond? Is this working for me? And if it's not, what's interesting is that when I had that insight and knowledge, then I started to have these other questions of, well, maybe I need a new coach. And truth be told, when I had this idea of maybe I need a life coach, I don't even know why I said those words, but they verbally came out of my mouth. And that's when I met my mentor the very next week. So it's really interesting just giving yourself the space that allows the new questions, new ideas, and the right people to come in. And I have no doubt that my mentor, my coach that helped me was really a godsend. I truly believe that in that divine intervention, because it was truly a, whoa, I have all these limiting ideas that aren't serving me. That's why they're limiting, because it wasn't empowering me. But as soon as I gave myself permission, the right people started to come to really help me along the journey.
Go ahead and read out Sherry's comment.
Oh, my family just tells you to get over it. Lose a job, go get another one, lose a child, you'll be all right. And when you try to express your feeling, then it's all self-pity. Yes. And thank you for sharing that, Sherry, because that is true. A lot of individuals believe, like, What are you doing? Just get over it. Move on. I also, and thank you, that reminds me so much of even in a job. The company I worked for gave 5 days of bereavement. Do you know what you do in 5 days? You're planning a funeral. You're just trying to get out there. You're trying to put your stuff together. 5 days is nothing. It's nothing. So when we add the family dynamics and those ideas, you know, the self, like, oh, God forbid, then you have self-pity. And then you have a society that doesn't even give space for grief. Of course there's pressure, and the challenge, or I think it's a challenge, is the idea, the unfortunate piece of it is that somehow we as individuals think we're in the wrong, when the truth is there's a lot of circumstances saying you're in the wrong, but that's not the truth. You're in your right, and you have grief, and it's normal and natural, healthy response to have a lot of emotions, no matter what the circumstances. And that's why this conversation is so important, because it's almost like we needed that permission slip that, yeah, we're having real feelings, real emotions. We need to be able to talk about them in a free, open space without judgment. And it won't always come from a loved one, but it may not, and that's okay. What's important is, how are you going to choose to respond, and make sure you're putting on your own oxygen mask and feeling good for yourself.
Yeah, I would add that I think it helps to diversify your sharers or sharees. I mean, come on, we will frustrate anybody close to us by how much our grief lingers. We'll chase off every friend.
Yeah.
If your spouse wasn't married to you, we chase them off. I remember chasing off my last remaining kind of tight friend. And he just looked at me and was like, God, I can't talk about this again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to chase them. I've now officially chased everyone off. And Joyce was with me only because she had to be. She was married to me, and we lived in the same house, and she had to pay half the mortgage. But let's, you know, in some ways, I don't blame them. Like, I honestly, I don't take that personally. This gentleman's name was Vince. I don't begrudge Vince for getting tired of me.
Yeah.
For some of us, grief lingers for years and years and years, and maybe the rest of our life. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, can you put it on? So maybe diversify, and maybe sometimes just stop sharing. You know, again, let me just say this. For me, I just kind of had to say, okay, enough is enough. I've now chased everyone off. And I still need to process this, and I journal. I started journaling a lot, and other things. So it is hard. You mentioned one of those comments mentioned cry with your mouth shut. Wow, is that poignant? Ouch.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just not the person you're going to share with. Their tolerance is zero, and I don't mean to excuse anybody's behavior, but maybe that's just not in their DNA. Yeah. I've noticed that, when we had our tragedy, there were some people who just rose up. They just showed up. Not even great friends. They just were there during our grief in this miraculous way. And then all these other truly good friends completely weren't.
Yeah.
And Joyce and I have talked about it many times. And I've, at least my opinion is this, it doesn't say that they're not good friends. It may say that they're not very good friends in that kind of a situation, in grief. They're just not good at it. But I think about all of the times I'm not good at it either. I'm a good friend in some ways, but I'm a crappy friend in other ways. And anyway, I'm babbling here. But the point is, I guess, that diversification is good. And we're just a mess when we're grieving.
Because I'm going to turn it over to Sharon, but before I do that.
It was really important.
What Bible verses you were able to lean on, even when you was like, I don't know, I don't want to. I don't even want to look at the Bible. I don't want to open it. So could you talk about that? I know people haven't had the chance to see your presentation, but share that part of what you were talking about, because I think some people, they want to lean on their spirituality and their community in Christ, but they don't know necessarily how.
Yeah, I assume that was geared to me because
you
froze up. Yeah, I mean, during the tough times, I couldn't even open a Bible. I mean, I couldn't pray, couldn't go to church. It was under the desk, kind of an MO. But in terms of, Ecclesiastes, Job, and Proverbs or Psalms were the only 3 books I could read eventually. That was it. And Ecclesiastes is the most stoic, melancholy book of the whole Bible. It's got, that's the meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Well, come on, baby. That's the perfect antidote for grievers. It is meaningless, right? Is that Solomon? And he just lays it out. There's no treacle for effect. It's just raw. But as far as a verse, it was this one. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but time and chance happen to us all. I'm sorry, that just says a lot about life. It's not linear. It's not always a cause and effect, right? It just isn't. Sometimes things happen to you that are tragic, and then Joe has little right? If the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Time and chance happen to us all. It just does.
Yeah.
Time and chance. And that, I don't know. I know that's a very stoic verse, but it just helped me so many times.
When you were sharing your story, Ken, about your friend Vince, and you had gotten down to the last friend, and that there was this part in you, and I had a client say this the other day, I have to put an end date on the grieving. It was like for you, like I'm labeling that part for you, but it was like, okay, now I got to get down to the much needed work. And I think for all of us, when we're on the journey, this click can happen for us, especially when we've been through the 30 friends already. We've gone through that. That part where it's like, okay, I've got to actively put a end date on this, the grieving part, and go after the healing part, which I think is really cool.
That's a good point. I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah, like that's okay. Now it's time to get to the work. And I bet there was a shift in you also. You may have didn't realize it at the time, but there's a shift where you actually start to go after the work. I love that you're able to share the scriptures that helped you go through. But I want to say that also a lot of times people pull back. One of the ladies shared yesterday that she was like, I didn't lean on my church, and that makes me so hard. There's a difference between leaning on your church, Ken, and leaning on your spirituality and your own personal walk. Leaning on your church, it feels like you're going to go in there, and for me, I expected them to have all this great wisdom, and they were going to open the doors and say, ta-da, this is what grieving looks like. And that's not what happened. There were many amazing people there for me, but what I needed on the healing journey wasn't there for me. I personally didn't turn away from my walk through my grief. I didn't, but I leave the space for other people. I get my question I would like to ask this question for you. Was there a difference between leaning on the church? That's where I'm going to, for you, and leaning on your own spirituality.
Yeah. The way I would put it is leaning on your church versus leaning on God.
Yeah.
And I would say big difference.
Yeah.
And I don't poo-poo the church either.
Yeah.
They were great. They were loving. They were nice. I just couldn't be with them.
Yeah.
I was too hurt and ashamed. I hate to use the word shame, but I have to admit that was part of it. Because I had been the pastor, right? So to be up on the stage and then to be on the back pew, that's a hard thing to do. Come on. And, come on. You got to agree with me.
There was some grief in there, I think.
There's all kinds of stuff. Okay. Yeah. So to go there, no, that was really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think there's a difference because he's endless in terms of his capacity to listen. He's good with grief, right? Because he doesn't talk back. He doesn't, he doesn't give you the heavy breath.
Yeah.
I mean, he does, but he puts it on mute and he does it. So he's breathing really heavy.
Thanks for bringing the comedy because I really needed it. I have a question for you. What happens to the person that can't lean on God because they're so mad? What advice do you give them?
I say, just live in it. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And I was not the handshaker, fist shaker at God, but some do. Some really feel like God has let them out. Off. I mean, so I don't know. Let me think that through. I mean, I think any feelings you have, I'm not saying they're legitimate, but they're there. To me, the more you deny your feelings, the less likely you are to overcome, to process them. Right, Diana?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd love to chime in on this because I had such a different response to each grief. One was, in a way, we unconsciously overshrined my sister Karen, who died by cancer. Like, Karen was perfect.
Right.
We overdid that, and I had to really unravel that a bit. And then with Raquel, who took her life, I was angry, but in my brain, I could not express that to God. And then something clicked around, like I almost felt this divine feeling of it's okay. And I truly had it's funny you're talking about letters. I journaled out like, dear God, I'm really pissed off.
Yes.
And I wrote and wrote and wrote because her death really challenged my beliefs, challenged my spirituality. It challenged so much around, I was angry and I said, why did you let her do this? Right. And I just acknowledged everything. And it's not and that exercise alone, that truthful conversation with God that I had in my way of through a letter, that released so much.
Love it.
And it was really funny how I was so much looping of like, I can't tell spirituality, God, I can't express these feelings. Like I was even having a judgment of the feelings in spiritual practice. Like, oh, I can't say that. I can't be ungrateful. I can't express anger. And it's really interesting how as soon as I did, it's almost as if it just wanted to release itself.
Yes.
And judgment that I felt from writing it was truly a release. And that's the piece of honoring, and almost kind of to the topic of this of finding your way of processing your grief. And I do think there's healthy ways, like the journaling, the conversations, the therapist, not the like, let me go get drunk every night and wash my sorrows away, but truthfully in a very healthy way. I think that's possible. And most true acknowledgement of the feelings that you're having with your practice, with your faith, that's okay. That's okay.
And I think, Diana, I love the letter idea only because you can even write a fictional letter. You say, I don't really believe all these things, but I'm just going to write them anyway. And then you just write all this stuff that's actually true, but you don't want to say it to God, right? Because you got all this weird guilt stuff. And I get it, and good, whatever. Maybe that's okay. But yeah, I love the letter writing to God and the processing that way. That you're right. That helped me too. Because you got to be honest with yourself.
So we have someone that says, my husband's suicide is the biggest loss that I've experienced in my 41 years of life. I'm slowly learning to give myself permission and grace to grieve and feel all of the emotions I am feeling. Thank you, Nancy, for that share. I want to incorporate that into my share. So when my biggest loss, the one that I carry with me, is my 15-year-old sister. Well, she was my half sister. I didn't live with her. In fact, I didn't even know she existed until I was 8 years old. And then I only saw her on her birthday, on my birthday. Like if you guys were here for the last session, that's the type of relationship me and my dad have. Like, we celebrate the birthdays. He shows up for all of the things. Like graduation, he was there. My King's Day, he danced with me. He shows up if you call him, but he doesn't take initiative. So when I lost my sister, because it was my dad's side of the family, no one in my immediate world was affected. Not my mom, not my classmates, not my cousins. Nobody who I interacted with on a regular basis was affected by my sister's loss. They were sad for me, and I think that if I had worn my grief on my sleeve, that they would have supported me. When I say I have a very supportive family, I have people who will stop whatever they're doing to rally around me. But grief showed up very different for me. I went back to living my regular life like nothing happened. And nobody checked on me and sent me to the therapy or provided grief support to me in any way, because I appeared to be fine. I appeared to have it all together. And it wasn't until, so two things happened, and I want to tie in the religious part because that was also a part of my journey. Two things happened. When my sister died, I was at a football game for high school. I was on the activities bus with all the cheerleaders and football. Well, not the football players. It was like the cheerleaders and the other athletic trainers. I was a trainer, and we had just won. So the bus was like, but everybody was excited, happy. But for some reason, my mood was like down. I didn't have a headache, but I just was in a terrible mood. And so I'm sitting there like, I can't wait till this over. When I get in the car, I'm gonna go to sleep. I had all these plans, and I got a phone call. And just so happens that my mom's name and my stepmom's name, my sister's mom's name, is the same thing, is Lisa. So when the person called me, they was like, hey, I'm Lisa's coworker. I'm calling to speak to your mom. So in my mind, I'm like, how you my mom coworker, but you trying to speak to my mom and you don't have her number? But in that moment, because of my mood, I didn't ask any questions. I just gave them my mom number and hung up. It was like, whatever, they'll figure it out. And that was, to me, God protecting me from finding out right there on that bus. And so I got in the car, and I got off the bus, and my mom was late, and I was mad because I was already in a bad mood, but she had to go drop off all my cousins and everything because she knew we had to drive to another county to go see my sister's mom. She had passed away. So my mom went and did her thing. She come to pick me up. I'm in a bad mood. I get in the car. I lay my head down, and the car was quiet. I didn't know, what was going on. And then my mom said, Joy, Sharon died. Like, even me saying that out loud, I feel the feelings, right? And I just screamed, she what? And I cried the whole way there. I remember the very first thing I saw when I got out of the car was my dad smoking a cigarette. And I wrote about it in my letter. I said, I walked by him like he was the ghost of Christmas past. I didn't even say nothing to him. I just walked straight by him into the apartment complex to my stepmom. When that happened, I'm so thankful that even though my mom did what she had to do to tell me in a protective way, things happened around me to make sure I was safe when I found the news. And I know that's not the case for everybody that's watching. Sometimes people find out at the very worst time. And so while we're talking about support, I want to make sure you understand, if you're the person who has to deliver the bad news, sometimes you just want to hurry up and tell somebody. Sometimes you really want to, you think they want to know right now, but taking a moment to figure out how to give them a safe space to receive this information, that's support. That's important. And then the second thing is, when I finally grieved my sister, I was at church, and the pastor said it was a story about how Mary's brother died, and she told Jesus, if you were here, my brother would still be alive. And oh my God, imagine how I feel, because that's how I felt. Like, Jesus, where were you when my sister died? Are you kidding me? If you was here, she would be here. And at that day, I actually went to church by myself. I always did, but I used to come late. This day, for some reason, I came early, and this girl came and was like, hey, can I sit with you? I noticed you sit by yourself all the time. And in my mind, I'm like, it's a free church. You can sit wherever you want to sit. But she was like, I was like, sure. She was like, okay, me and my sister are going to come sit with you. And they came, and when the sermon went on, it was her and her sister that walked me up to the aisle to be able to lay down and cry and break down and get all of that grief, pain out of me. So I wanted to share those two stories because I want you to realize those sisters didn't have to, like, they randomly asked me. They didn't know what the pastor was going to be preaching about. They didn't know. In last week's session, we talked about the difference between relief and support. And we said we want to be supportive to people, but we don't want to be their only support. We don't want to be the person that they lean on for everything, because that's too heavy for most of us. If we're not grief specialists, if we're not trained on how to support people in that way, that's too much to ask of anyone. But I wanted to throw that out there to give you guys an example before we start talking about some of the things that are out there for support, that on a human level, there are ways that we can support each other, but we still need to set boundaries and know our limitations as well. I'll bring it over to you, Diana.
I love what you're bringing up around boundaries and limitations. And then there's also the theme of it's and we were talking about this earlier, right? But it's not always family, or it just seems like it's the people you kind of don't expect that just show up. And I remember that I had a boss, and she had been my previous boss, but I had gotten different promotion anyway. So we kept in touch. And I remember she told me, did you know that the company offers free therapy sessions through insurance? And she wasn't technically my boss at that time. And I was like, why is she telling me this? Here I am with my own internal stuff, not talking. This is work, right? So I'm not telling anybody. And she's still a great friend now. We keep in touch and we both left that company. But I always think about how she said that. And many years later, I think I asked her, like, it's so funny you told me that. She's like, somebody had told me at work, and I just kept looking around and I just thought, maybe Diana needs to hear it. And so it's weird how she didn't even know why she really told me, but she just had this feeling like maybe Diana needs to hear it. And I think that happens quite often, more than we realize, that there's just the right people, the right person. And we talked about this last time too, around how sometimes we'll get signs and interceptions and ways we don't ever imagine or know. And even for you, Joy, with the sisters that came and supported you, because I know when you and I talked, when you saw them later on, many weeks later, they were like, oh, hi. Like they were acting as if they kind of didn't know who you were. And so all that to say is that I do believe that there's this divine intervention and support when we need it. And the trick is to not get caught onto like who should or should not be supporting me, but really receiving the support and knowing that could come from many ways and avenues. And sometimes it's just a song playing on at the right time that you're like, wow, I really needed to hear that. I needed to hear those lyrics, right? And that's okay. It's beautiful when we start to see that for ourselves.
And I have a comment for you in the audience. I know you can relate to this, Sharon. Go ahead and read it.
And most jobs don't even include aunts, uncles, etc. When we have to use our vacation to be able to do that. They are like as if they are not as important. Yes, Jerry, 100%. One of the things that I shared early on is, she said 5 days. I know Erica only got 3 days. She lost her son and she got 3 days bereavement. And she ended up taking extra time. And even the fact that she went back to work so early, I even questioned it. She's like, I'm going back to work. And I was like, what? What do you mean you're going back to work? And she's just like, well, what do you expect me to do, Sharon? Just sit here and grieve all day? Doesn't matter. I'm going to feel like this. I might as well go back to work. So, going back to what we were talking about earlier, and that was with Erica. I was the one that delivered the news to Erica. And I was walking up the stairs to tell her that we had in fact found Austin and that he had drowned at the lake. And I remember the only thing that came to my mind was tell her the truth. Tell her the truth. And it was, don't sugarcoat it. Don't put a bunch of stuff in there. And she opened the door. And the way she opened the door, she came around the door. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. And we're 10 years apart. So here's my baby sister. She comes around the door, these two big old eyes. And she looked at me like, give me good news. Give me good news. Ken, I don't know if you know this, but on my way over there, Joyce was driving in front of me. Joyce is Ken's wife. She was driving in front of me and she got out of the car to say hi. And here she comes to the car and I was like, Joyce. And then I told her what I was going to do. And she was like, gave me a hug and went away. I forgot about that till right now. She said, just give me good news. And my eyes just said, honey, we found him and he drowned. In her version of the story, honey, we found him. And that pause that I made right there, she thought was the good news. In that pause, when I paused right there.
Oh.
And so when I tell the story, she and I tell the story quite often on the stage. She said, when she paused right there, I thought it was, they found him. Oh, they found him. And I said, we found him. He drowned. And just from that pause. So, and that point I have for that is that grievers have this heightened sense of everything that's going on around them. And they're listening to every word we're saying. And sometimes we say things truly innocently, but the griever perceives it and takes it in and takes it personally, and it digs and it takes that knife and it churns that knife right in there. One of the other things I want to just throw a couple tips out there. I know we're going to give some actionable steps. If you're sitting with the griever, don't pat them, touch them, try to soothe over what's going on. Let whatever is happening to them. Sometimes sitting with a griever who is absolutely doing the ugly cry, snot is running out of their nose. We want to fix this. Don't hug them and they're there. Oh, they're there, sweetie, because you stop the emotion of what they're trying to get out. You stop them right in their track. Don't reach over and hand them Kleenex. They're most times grown adults. If they want Kleenex, they'll grab the Kleenex. So when you're with the griever, as much as you can, just be in their space. Just listen to what they're saying and don't try to fix it. Even if what they're telling you is ugly, disgusting, and fearful to you, just sit in their space. And that is sometimes really hard as support for us to be the support and be that person.
And then I want to talk about the grief recovery method because you listed that as one of the actual research-based support things that's out there. So tell us what that is.
Yes, it's the founder found himself in suicidal thoughts, and I believe he did try to take his life, and he survived, and that was a real wake up of, whoa, I survived. And then he started to go into, well, why did I survive? Obviously, there's a miracle here. There's a reason. And that shifted for him completely his relationship on why did I want to die versus why did I want to die over living? And then he started to unpack, wait a minute, where did my desire for death come from? And that led him into the what he calls the recovery method. And the recovery is really, and I love it because I don't know that the word, and we talked about grief and how that word is so small, but really it means so much and it's got so much emotion. But the recovery is also little baby steps, the little actionable steps that will allow you to develop a positive relationship with grief. And the reason I love that is because when I was in the thick of my grief, the idea of feeling good and happy, I was like, that's just rude. Like, I went through death, my sisters died. I can't even think about smiling and laughing. I don't want to feel this way, but that idea felt so foreign and out of this world that I could get behind. I do want to feel better, and I just want a little step to help me feel better. And that's why I love it, because it's an actionable baby step program. The book, they have the book, you can buy it on Amazon, and I definitely left the links as well to the book. But there are specialists that can help and guide you through the actual book and the program. And I just love something that feels so less of the shoo-shoos or like feel better or like exactly.
I know how you feel.
Yeah, I know how you feel. Like, no, you don't. You don't. Do you really?
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's beautiful is also understanding how do you support somebody too that has gone through some loss of, wow, I can't imagine. That's the word we learned. I can't imagine. Yeah. I love that phrase. I can't imagine. Julia says the book was recommended to me after my husband died. It touches on something mentioned in the last session. The one loss may bring up unresolved grief from earlier in life. Exactly. It does. It does dig into the unresolved grief that have, and this is another piece, and I talked about this in the workshop, is that there are, what we know, at least over 40 identified grief experiences, grief and loss, meaning we can experience grief if we have a breakup. We can experience grief if a job doesn't fulfill or turn out as we might have hoped. A breakup of a friend, right? Best friends, childhood. There's so many moments in life where we experience loss, much more than we realize. And that book definitely touches on all of the unresolved grief that everybody experiences throughout their life. It's really beautiful.
Another thing you mentioned was option B. And I love, because Sharon, you told me about option B,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. I love when I'm doing these grief retreats and then there's overlap in the resources that you guys, so that gives it credibility to let you know it's something that everybody's talking about. So tell us what option B is.
So option B was written by, of course, the name, because you threw this out, is Susan Sandberg. She was the CEO of Facebook. And the one thing that I love about hers, and I quote this all the time, is that grief sucks. She went to her pastor. Susan Sandberg found her husband had died of a massive heart attack while on a treadmill when she left the house. And she went to her rabbi, actually, and she was crying and she broke down in front of him. And she said he gave her some of the best advice she ever received from a support someone supporting her in her grief. And he said, grief sucks. Lean into the suck. And that is truly how we have to process the grief. And that's what we were talking about in the last session, is like really leaning into that. And to me, it's literally a physical lean in. It's really leaning forward and leaning into it and leaning into that pain. So definitely beautiful, beautiful.
And then something else that you put in there was the dinner party, Diana. So what's that?
Okay, the dinner party came again. The universe interceded. I was actually a part of the Lean In group, option B, and I just had this idea. I want to start throwing dinner grief parties, and I did. This was before the pandemic, where I would invite a few people in the Bay Area where I was at the time, and we'd talk about grief. And I, at this point, had become a grief specialist. And through that, somebody told me, do you know about the dinner party? And I thought it was like, yeah, we're at the dinner party. And they're like, no, there's a real nonprofit called the Dinner Party.
Yeah.
And it's truly a virtual, now it's virtual, and it's similar. You may or may not eat, but it's truly having an open conversation with other fellow people that have gone through grief. Again, the support of, it might not be like your friend or your person or family member, but it is somebody. Generally, these parties, there are filled and invited with others that have gone through very similar experiences. And it's just a very healthy way to share with no judgment. And there isn't a rush. The reason why I love these organizations is that, and what I've really learned is that there's not this feeling, a sense of, let's fix it for you. Let's hush and, oh, it's okay, feel better. It's truly here's a safe space to pour out your heart. There's no judgment. There's no rush to fix it, feel better. It's just meeting you exactly where you are. And that's why I love the dinner party as well, because it is an organization that really brings together individuals that have gone through it and just allows people to share from a very open space.
So we're about to wrap up, and I'm going to give everyone a chance to share their final thoughts, their anything that we weren't able to mention as far as grief support. For me, so I went to a death cafe, and that is actually what is it called when you like that? The death cafe is like a brand where, in order for you to host death cafes, they have a set of rules and
guidelines
to follow. So we're kind of mimicking that with our morning meeting that we're going to have on tomorrow. But the way that it's set up is literally a private Zoom. So they, in the Death Cafe brand, they tell you to bring food, like how she said with the dinner party, just some type of snack. And that kind of gets the conversation going. You just tell people, you know, what you're snacking on, and you tell them why you're there. But it's literally just a room. It reminds me of like when I was a kid, they had the chat rooms where people would talk about certain things, but it was just virtual, it's not video. It's a room where you can just get whatever you want off your chest, no matter what. Nobody's there to coach you. Nobody's there to fix you. Nobody's there to say, well, you should do this. You're just there to be able to express yourself freely without judgment. And it was so crazy because the ones that I went to about 3 different ones as I was just researching about grief and trying to figure out what's out there, what's good. No one was the same. We never knew where the direction of the talk was going to be, if you were going to cry while you're there or if you were going to leave feeling uplifted or motivated to do something. It was just, you just go with no expectations and you try that. You sit in it and you listen to what other people are talking about, what they're experiencing, what they're frustrated about. So I really encourage you to find a death cafe that with a population of people that you feel connected to, because you will be surprised how just letting it off your chest can help. So I'll let Sharon go ahead and tell us her takeaways.
I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Ken. Again, thank you to the grievers that showed up. Thank you to each and every one of you. I love that we got to talk about God and our relationship to God and our grief. And I hope you guys find some solace in that, or it helps you if you're struggling in that area. But thank you, Ken, and thank you, Diana.
And Ken, share with us just the resources. Give us your final thoughts about this talk and people having to find support while they're grieving.
Yeah, I think the biggest take home for me is processing grief with God and at God. Maybe a really, really big thing. I'm gonna work on that just as a thought, because I think
Yeah.
I think that look, if you have this benevolent father in your life and then something happens, come on, you can't help but look at that benevolent father and say, whoa, 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 whoa. You're in control of everything. Why did you let that happen? Right. So you're gonna have some feelings towards God. And how you process those and how honest you are, and what vehicles you use to process those without circumventing the guilt and all the weird, things we have. That's a big topic. Diane, I love your letter idea.
Yeah.
So I'm personally going to work on this just in terms of a thought experiment, kind of record what I did and how I think people can process their relationship with God vis-a-vis their grief.
Share about your book, Ken.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Letters to My Son in Prison. And it's about Lucas and I coming back together. It's about how my marriage survived the trauma. And it's about how I reconciled my relationship with God, how I came back to God after being flatlined. And it happened in a crazy, crazy place. Sharon, I shared that story with you, in a very dark church, completely dark, transcendent music and gorgeous lyrics. And so, yeah, I kind of had my bottom, my moment where everything kind of became clear to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a journey. I'm getting incredible feedback. It's only been out for 10 days, but the outpouring of people's own grief story has been unbelievable. In fact, so much so that I'm realizing I'm going to have to be careful, because when I hear so many stories, it starts to affect me emotionally, right?
Yeah.
So I can tell I'm going to have a little bit of a boundary there. But yeah, it's been incredibly well received, and I'm just super touched.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And so when you watch his presentation tomorrow, the link right under the presentation is where you can buy the book. So make sure you check that out. And then Diana, we have your presentation and we have your course under your presentation today. So tell us a little bit about your course, and then they have a coupon code in order to get a discount on that.
Yes, the course is Finding Grief Support. We really talk about important foundational elements to finding the support. And one of the key takeaways from that is to really think about, how do you want to feel? And it isn't about the right answer. It's around, what is that? How do I want to feel? And that little actionable step that you can take towards feeling that. For me, I just knew I wanted to feel better and not feel overwhelmed. And having that as a guiding post enabled me to start receiving that support and really looking. And it's funny because I didn't look, because once I said it, then it happened. I mean, I did look, I guess, but I had to acknowledge where I was. And for anybody that's watching, I definitely encourage you to think about, how do I want to feel? And then the resources do come as well. I do want to share a takeaway, which is, obviously, I'm so grateful to everyone here to join, and Joy and Sharon for organizing this. This is amazing. And I always think about, I wish I would have had this when I was in the thick of my grief, but I also know that it comes out exactly as it should. But one of my takeaways is really around giving yourself permission to be where you are. And I love this idea of not forcing it, and leaning into and being okay with where you are, and leaning into that spirituality or God, and feeling okay with that. Again, right? Like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel the emotions, because there's so much judgment about how we should and should not grieve from society, friends, family, that you get to choose how you want to grieve. And if that means I'm going to be angry today, so be it, right? What's that healthy outlet for you? And everybody, that's the empowerment of grief, and learning to develop that positive relationship with your own grief and your journey.
Thank you. So we did not forget, it's giveaway time. Yeah. And because we're talking about support and we want you to know that that is what Life After Loss is here to do, support you, we are going to give away our access pass, except you get to choose whether you want Life After Loss or if you want Gone Too Soon. And so if you don't know what Gone Too Soon is, that was the retreat that we did last year that really got to processing your grief and being connected with your person, feeling safe and feeling seen. If you think that you need that, then let us know. Otherwise, you can get the all access pass for Life After Loss, where you're able to talk about what to do next. Now that you processed it a little bit, now what? And so, drum roll, please. The winner for this session is Tina. Tina, we would like to give you an all access pass. And so all you have to do is reply to one of our emails, Tina Ramirez, so that we can gift you the all access pass. Thank you so much for joining us. We're about to shift over to our next talk, which is creative expression. So bye. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.